Hello everybody, welcome to another RM Sotheby's car show, our podcast and YouTube show, shall we say, because you're going to get this in audio and wonderful Technicolor. And carrying on with the precedent that we've kind of set in the episodes that we've broadcast so far, we've come to another great location, and we are here in Savile Row in central London. And for those of you who are not necessarily London or even UK based, Savile Row is the home of British tailoring, or traditional British tailoring. So pretty much this whole street, and we're sort of sandwiched between Bond Street, very upmarket. I can't afford anything in Bond Street. Regent Street, also upmarket. Some things I can afford, but not many. So we're sort of sandwiched between the middle. And here we are in Savile Row, and this road is just full of, I'm not going to say fashion stores, I'm going to say tailors. And so kind of a subtle difference. This is, if you want a bespoke suit, this is the place to come. And it has been for like, I don't know, 200 years, a long time. The other thing worth mentioning about this precise location is that there is a building behind me, and I'm pointing at it. For those of you listening to the podcast, that isn't going to be helpful, but I am pointing to a building behind me, which used to be Apple Records, and it's very, very famous, and there's a blue plaque on the front of the building, because in 1969, January 1969, on the roof of the building behind me, that is where the Beatles performed their last ever live gig. And my memory of that is that they shouldn't have been doing it, and I think the police stormed the roof of the building and dragged them away from their microphones, I think.
Legendary moment.
A legendary moment. And I am joined, and you've met him before on previous episodes, I'm by a car expert and our business development director, Duccio. And so this is a great, what an amazing location. Yeah?
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Peter. And it's probably one of the best locations you can host an event in London. It's a sunny day, and the selection of cars is also fantastic. I mean, it is an official concours organized by Magneto, and I must say, like, the selection is really great. Sunny day in London, in the most central location you can get. So yeah, very happy to be here.
Yes, it is an amazing venue, and it's also absolutely rammed with people, and Savile Row isn't always a street where you get a lot of people. So I think the combination of a beautiful sunny day, and I'm not sure the middle of London has ever seen an event quite like this, in terms of this array of cars.
Oh, maybe the London to Brighton is a good example, where they show like every year, but it's very specific with veteran cars. I think the selection today is really great because they have like modern stuff, pre-wars, great 1950s Ferraris, and even like weird solar taxis.
Yeah, we're sitting next to a vehicle that looks like a polo mint or a hula hoop, a completely circular vehicle which is solar panelled, and apparently this is the future of taxis in the city centre, which is cool. Actually, I quite like it. You can only get one passenger in it, mind you, so it's not two people, but. But I think that's a bit of a theme for this event. I think the political climate and the social climate, shall we say, is leading event organisers to try and build the future of automotive, of the automotive world, of cars, and build the connection between history and the future. And we sort of saw that a little bit around the London to Brighton, or it was a discussion around the London to Brighton. It's all very well having lots of 150-year-old cars, but what is the future? And I think this event is very similar, because in fact there are a couple of electric cars in the row, and also the car manufacturers that are exhibiting, quite a few have chosen to bring an example of their heritage fleet, and also what they think of as the future, which I think is quite nice. Being in Savile Row is all about design. It's all about making things beautiful, and it's about bespoke. You, in particular, are really into design.
I am. Yeah.
Is that for you the aspect of the car world that interests you more than anything? It's the design more than the oily bits, shall we say?
Absolutely, yeah. The thing that strikes me the most in a car is the beauty, so the design of it, the aesthetics, and the functionality as well of the design. So if you take, for example, Zagato as a coach builder, I love the fact that every piece of design in the body of the car had a particular function, like the double bubble, the cut tail, or stuff like that. Those are particular design features that look beautiful to me, to any enthusiast eyes, but they were made with a specific function, to win races, to be faster. And yeah, in general, I love design, and I think Savile Row is like one of the best places you can be at in London to find great suits. So it's a nice combo of fashion, cars, and beautiful things.
We are partnering, RM Sotheby's are partnering with Oswald Boating this week for this event, these couple of days, and we're basing our hospitality in his boutique. And we had the chance to have a conversation with him a little bit earlier, and he was talking a lot about his approach to design, and it was very, very similar in the sense that if you're going to design something to wear, it needs to look great, needs to look fantastic, but also it has to be functional.
Yeah.
It has to serve a purpose. There's
Absolutely.
no, as he said, there's no point in wearing some crazy looking outfit or a suit if actually it's just impractical or uncomfortable to be in. And that's exactly what you were saying about car design. Zagato, you know, I mean, most of the great car designers design cars to be beautiful, to be aesthetically really pleasing, but also functional.
Yeah.
And whether that function is to make them fast or to make them aerodynamic and make them efficient or whatever it might be.
Yeah.
So
And also being Italian from Milan, the kind of the fashion capital of Italy and probably of Europe, I've always been kind of involved in fashion, in design. You know, we Italians were crazy about design in anything we do. So yeah, that's a bit my background and why I'm so attracted by these great cars and great designs, like this Ferrari 166 Touring, which is one of my favorite cars ever. Talking about great Ferraris.
It is a beautiful car, and I'm just going to pick up on something because we mentioned the Beatles gig.
Yeah.
So 3 cars in behind us is a Facile Vega.
Yeah.
And they're not a common car, you don't see them around a lot. And famously, Ringo Starr, Beatles drummer, he had a Facile Vega.
Oh, really?
And when they did their gig on the roof behind us in 1969, there are photographs taken from up on the roof looking down into this street. And I reckon within 5 meters of where we're sitting right now, Ringo Starr's Facile Vega was parked in the street when they did that gig in 1969, and there is one just behind us.
Yeah.
We've also got an amazing convertible Ferrari Testarossa.
Oh, yeah.
Now I'm pretty sure that Agnelli had one of those cars built for his. It was unique for him, isn't it?
Yeah, that's the very car, actually the only Ferrari Testarossa made by Ferrari officially as a factory in a Spider configuration for the Avvocato Agnelli, which had obviously great taste in cars, in fashion, in anything, and he decided to build a one-off Testarossa with this beautiful gray and blue color configuration. But what I love is not just the design of the car itself, but also the plate, which is TOOOOOG, and G stands for Gianni Agnelli. G is for his name.
Is that right?
Yeah.
So
yeah.
Now viewers, listeners, you're going to have to forgive me because this is just a fundamental lack of research on my part. Is that car behind us then? Is that his car?
Yeah.
Or that is actually his?
That is the Agnelli car.
That isn't a copy that's had.
No. That's the very unique Ferrari Testarossa Spider owned by Agnelli, and the one next to it, this Ferrari 166 Touring Barchetta, was also owned by Agnelli.
Yeah,
quite a special combo.
And as you say, I mean, Agnelli, the boss of the Fiat empire, in his heyday, I suppose, in the sort of late 50s, 60s, was the ultimate playboy, wasn't he?
He was.
I mean, the boats, the Reavers, the supercars,
his fashion style as well.
And
he was very unique, very flamboyant, very eccentric, but in a very always very elegant.
Very elegant
That's what
way.
people really loved.
Funnily enough, when we did our recording at the Monaco auction, there was a Fiat Jolly, and that. Agnelli had given that to his secretary, and Michael Squire's very witty remark, I thought, was that he was just pontificating on what the relationship between Mr. Agnelli and his secretary might have been, because, and I'm not casting aspersions, it may have been purely professional, but he was, of course, a well-known ladies' man, wasn't he?
Yeah, absolutely.
Much like yourself, Duccio.
He was
but, you know,
on another level.
In another life, yes, exactly. Not something I'm known for either, actually. Is there a car that you'd take home above any other?
There are two. The Ferrari 166, because I remember this very car at Villa d'Este, I think 10 years ago. This car won the Coppa d'Oro Best of Show public referendum prize, and it raced at the Mille Miglia with Count Marzotto, so it's a very, very important car. But the other car I would take is a car that we brought, not because it's our car, but because I love Alfa Romeo, and it's the Alfa Romeo 1750 6C Zagato, which is a fantastic car, and it's all original, all preserved, and it's one of my very favorite pre-war designs. And it's a racing car. It's a racing chassis. So,
and I always think, because I'm a pre-war guy at heart in terms of my passion and how I grew up in my family, and the thing is, I think in the year 2022, when you have a big line of exotic modern supercars, people look at those pre-war cars and they sort of, almost with sympathy, they go, "Oh, isn't it nice? What a nice old car!" You know, thinking that its top speed is 50 miles an hour, you know, downhill with the wind behind it. And of course, what people don't realise is that when you look at a car like that Alfa, that was 100% the supercar of its day. As you say, it was built for competition. It was but even today, and I maintain this so often, people that don't necessarily intrinsically love or know very much about pre-war cars, I quite often find myself saying, look, if you were to take this car for a 3-mile drive, get out on some country roads, you would be astonished at the performance of this car, because they are properly fast cars, aren't they?
And that pure mechanics. I mean, there is no electronics, of course.
No.
You have to do the job 100% while driving, and you don't need to go that fast to enjoy the car. That's the fundamental aspect. Like with modern cars, with modern Ferraris, Lamborghinis, and so on, you need to really push them hard to enjoy the feeling, right? The emotions. With pre-war cars, even if you're going like at 50, 60 kilometers per hour, you feel a complete, emotion, and it's a sensation that it's unbeatable. So
and you can do 50 miles an hour actually on a country road in a pre-war car, and it feels like 150 miles an hour.
Absolutely.
And I know in a previous life I used to be a road test journalist on Autocar magazine, and one of the great privileges of a job like that is that we were constantly having the latest supercars coming through the magazine, and I was there in the days of cars like the Diablo, and that was my era. Ferrari 355s, I guess, were the current thing. Maybe 360, I think, had just come out. And they're actually quite hard cars to use. Certainly on British roads.
Absolutely. You can't really go that fast on these roads. So.
No.
And but apart from the beauty of driving that car, I think the design is so pure of the 1750 Alfa Zagato. It's an example of simplicity, typical of the 1930s design in Italy, which is simply timeless for me. So,
No, I agree.
And I'm biased. I'm Italian. I love Italian cars. I know, but
And here we are in the home of British tailoring, in traditional British tailoring, and we're not talking about any of the traditional British cars, but there's some lovely cars here from Rolls-Royce, Bentley, Aston Martin, all of the big British brands, Jaguar, that are all represented here, which is fantastic. And now, look, we're going to have to, I think if we're in Savile Row, we're going to have to talk a little bit about clothes. And you are from Milan.
Yeah.
So, I'm just going to throw it out there. I'm just going to give you a big pile of money. I know that's not going to happen because you know me too well to know that I'm not going to give you a big pile of money. Now, are you going to spend that money in Savile Row and come out with something that looks very, very British, perhaps? Or are you going to go and spend your money in Milan and come out looking, well, that's very Italian?
Yeah. So, difficult question, but I think being Italian, being a big supporter of Italian fashion, I would probably spend the money in Milan. It's probably also cheaper, to be fair.
Yeah, which is a factor.
Yeah, no, but I love the legendary Italian tailors like, Caraceni, the haute couture of Dolce Gabbana and Armani are simply fantastic and so timeless, But I must say Oswald Boating, for example, is one of the best tailors and most elegant tailors around, with a bit of a kind of an eccentric style as well, which I love. But
he has an amazing use of colour, doesn't he?
Yeah.
Because I think, it would be fair to say that British tailoring is not known for bright colour, is it?
Yeah.
It's quite, we're quite conservative.
Classic,
we're quite classic.
yeah.
In the winter, we might wear tweed or, wool. And, and even when we do a summer suit, at best it might be linen. A bit like my linen jacket, which anyone watching this podcast will probably immediately appreciate did not come from Savile Row, but there we go.
It's a beautiful colour.
Thank you, Duccio. Yeah. That's very kind of you. Oswald does a lot. He does use colour to amazing effect.
Yeah.
And also, what I love about Oswald is he is very rock and roll, isn't he?
Yeah,
because
absolutely.
He's done a lot with Hollywood.
Yeah.
He designed the clothes for Men in Black.
Mm-hmm.
The Men in Black suits.
Yeah.
I mean, there's nothing more famous than Men in, and also Bad Boys.
Okay.
Name the Bad Boys car.
The Bad Boys car. Is that a Testarossa?
No, I think a 964 Turbo, I think.
Oh, yeah, you're right. Testarossa is Miami Vice.
Miami Vice.
Yeah, you're right.
Well, yeah, that's a whole different world of fashion.
A whole different world, yeah.
Have you got a white, a sort of a lightweight, maybe white pale cream linen suit?
I do.
And do you roll the sleeves up?
Yeah, I do. And I smoke cigars when I wear that. Yeah.
Have you got a Testarossa?
No, I don't.
No, okay.
I wish.
You need to put that right.
Yeah. A white one.
Thank you, Duccio, for spending a few minutes talking to me at this
you,
lovely
Peter.
event. It's we're here again tomorrow, and it's I hope the weather stays beautiful and sunny and hot as it is today. And round the corner, for those of you who aren't hardcore Londoners or know London very well, is Bond Street. Now, Bond Street, you can buy all sorts of wonderful luxury goods in Bond Street: leather, bags, shoes, clothing, but a lot of people head to Bond Street to buy a watch.
Mm-hmm.
And there are all of the premium brands, retailers selling all manner of Pateks and Rolex and Breguet and Chopard and all of those watch brands. And watches are something which have a very unique relationship with the car-loving world. Interestingly, when you pick up a classic car magazine, they don't tackle many subjects that aren't classic cars, but they do talk about watches. So there is this unique relationship with watches and cars, and we're going to discuss that a little bit with Sotheby's watch expert, Tom Heap, and he will be joining us after the break, and we're going to chat a little bit about watch-related matters, which I know are going to be absolutely fascinating, so please come back and join us. So welcome everybody, welcome back to the second part of this week's podcast, and in the first part I was sitting actually out in Savile Row, And we're still in Savile Row, but we're not out in the street in the blazing sun. We're actually in Oswald Boating's boutique store in Savile Row, and which is a beautiful environment. And for those of you who are listening to the podcast, you won't be able to see the fact that there are some wonderful jackets and suits behind me, designed by Mr. Boating, and it's a wonderful environment for us to be hosting our guests over the Savile Row Concours, which is a 2-day event, and we're very pleased to be here. But as well as the tailoring that's in here, the incredible tailoring, we've also got a display of jewellery items and a few watches which have been brought along by my colleagues at Sotheby's. And so as well as what is going on out in the row with all of the wonderful cars, with alongside all of the wonderful tailoring that's a very big part of this event, we've also got other things going on, and our Sotheby's are bringing quite a lot to the table. And I'm very pleased to be joined on this podcast by Mr. Tom Heap, who is the resident watch specialist, UK watch specialist. Is that how we describe it?
Yeah, I'd say UK.
Yep.
I kind of look after the UK end of things, which is good fun. So yeah, my job's basically going looking for rare and expensive watches and then convincing people to kind of take them to auction, which is a good laugh.
I mean, the life of a specialist within an auction house, and you spend your time persuading people to sell fine watches at auction, and on the RM Sotheby side of business, we obviously doing the same with old cars and collectible cars. Mm-hmm. But generally, I mean, we've been talking a little bit on this podcast how strong the market for cars is at the moment, based on what we've seen so far this year. So, what's your assessment of the watch market?
I mean, it's kind of gone crazy, like, I mean, in a very positive way. I mean, even if we're just looking at like the auction realm, so I think in 2020 the auction figures for Sotheby's, Christie's, Phillips and Antiquorum globally, just in auctions for watches, was $350 million. Yeah. The year after it was $600 million, so you're seeing massive increases. But then we're also seeing quality just beats everything else. If you've got something really special, people will pay above and beyond for it, whether that's like tripling an already high-end estimate. But there's serious appetite there, and it just keeps growing, which is fantastic, really.
I mean, do you think that with watches, have you seen a trend in the market that has kicked off in recent months, which sort of is exceptional? I mean, have you seen it tracking similarly in previous years, or what?
Yeah, I think the market's kind of been kind of going crazy for the last few years. Obviously, like the pandemic sort of accelerated everything. As you said, everyone kind of wanted to put money into sort of an asset that was a bit more tangible, and worst case scenario, you could probably chuck in your hand luggage. So
yes.
So not that we condone that kind of thing, but it's people have been kind of looking for more interesting kind of assets and sort of a little more unusual things to kind of put money into, and that's not necessarily driving force behind it, but the market's grown pretty exponentially sort of in the last kind of couple of years. 12 months especially, it's been really fantastic. So.
And are you seeing that across the board in terms of sort of, I mean, you'll have to strip out some brands, but if you start talking about the high-end luxury watch brands, that's happening across the board, is it?
Yeah, I think the thing is now we're kind of getting to a point where, like Rolex and Patek Philippe, amazing although they are, they're a little bit not trapped out or anything like that, but people are always trying to look for the next kind of thing around the corner. So we saw that this year and last year with FP Journe. That's kind of, they've gone crazy in terms of their figures. I mean, in the early 2000s, when people were buying them, they were like, buying one and then having to kind of sweat about it every single night because they would never get this money back. But I mean, put it this way, in Geneva, we sold, just gone in our May auctions, we sold an FP Journe Resonance, which is one of the kind of flagship models for the brand, for, I think it was over 200,000 Swiss, and we'd sold the same watch 5 years earlier for 30. So it was, wow. You're seeing real growth there, which is fantastic, and it's. I think we were talking about this a bit earlier on. It's just the thing is there are more and more people who can afford this kind of thing nowadays, and there just simply isn't enough to go around.
With watches, I sort of track a little bit Rolex to see what's going on in that market, and I read something interesting the other day where a journalist said Rolex is no longer a retail brand because you actually can't walk into any store in the country and buy one.
Yeah.
So, which is a bizarre thing, isn't it? So, I mean, there's some truth in that, right? I mean, they control the supply, and that controls the market forces.
Yeah, I mean, I think it depends how you kind of look at it, but I mean, you know, when you walk down Bond Street now and look in like Watches of Switzerland or something like that, you'll see around every Rolex watch in the window, like a sports model, like a Daytona or a Submariner, it says for exhibition only.
Yeah.
And I think this ended up coming about because people were putting their names down for waiting lists for watches they'd never actually tried on. So they'd get the call and, you know, they'd be like, okay, well, you know, you've got like 3 hours to come pay for this. And I'm like, well, I've never seen it, so I don't know if I actually want to buy it. But, you know, with the resale market, people do. But yeah, I mean, there is that aspect. It's as you were saying with Ferrari, it's still very much that in watches. So, you know, you kind of have to work your way up and, you know, buy what you can to be offered something by a retailer. And I think with Rolex, because they operate through a number of retailers, they don't actually sell anything themselves. They are a manufacturer, and that's kind of it. So every Rolex watch you've ever seen, they've sold. So they, you know,
right.
It's not necessarily in their interest to then make the unavailable available if it's selling the rest of their stock. So yeah. But,
yeah,
you know.
yeah. I've always thought that the best opportunity to buy a Rolex is if, particularly in Switzerland, like if you're in Zurich and you're airside at the airport, and you just stick your head into the Zurich Rolex shop and say, "What's for sale?" I'll buy anything. Just tell me what's for sale. Rolex is a brand which has hung a fair bit of its heritage on its relationship with not so much the car industry, but in particular motorsport.
Yeah.
It is a thing, isn't it? And the one thing that we talk quite a lot about is how there is a relationship between people who are traditional car lovers, car enthusiasts, and the fact that even if there is very little else in their life that they get enthusiastic about, a lot of them do get enthusiastic about watches. Yeah. How do you see that? I mean, do you think that the relationship between certain watch brands and the car world, has that been important to the way the market moves?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, if you look at if we go kind of straight to, you know, the Daytona, for example, I mean, that's always kind of been a watch that's kind of been closely associated with motorsport, at least, you know, on the Daytona track where it kind of gets its name from. But yeah, I think there's always been a correlation between the two. I mean, even at base, you know, the Daytona is almost like a racing tool. You know, it has a chronograph setting. It is a stopwatch. So, and around the bezel, you've got a tachometer which calculates units per hour. So you'll be able to calculate the speed an object is traveling between 2 points. And I think, you know, that's kind of been heralded in through, you know, characters like Paul Newman, which is, you know, a huge one.
I'm sorry to interrupt your flow, but let's talk about, because the Paul Newman Daytona, Rolex Daytona, I mean, that's sort of now that's a fabled watch, isn't it? I mean, and that sold not so long ago, didn't it?
It was 2017. Unfortunately, it wasn't us, but it was a very big sale. It's sold for, I think, about 17.5 million US.
Yeah, that's
crazy. Which is a chunk, especially for a watch that, yes, of course, it has his, you know, Paul Newman's Paul Newman, but you know, back in the day, they were $200. You know, when they were made. So, and the joke was no one at the time really wanted the Paul Newman. You know, when they were first made, they were called the exotic dials. In the early 60s. Rolex still had this Art Deco style dial, which, you know, people were kind of moving away from. They didn't really want quite elaborately decorated stuff. They wanted black and they wanted silver, and it was all kind of getting towards space age and stuff like that. So they weren't really crazy about it. I mean, to the point where you hear stories about jewelers or retailers who had Paul Newman in the window, and they call it Rolex, we like send someone down and swap the dial over because we don't want them. And you know, that kind of carried on for a very long time. Like, it only really became popular in like the 90s. And even in, you know, in auction catalogs from the early 90s, you see Paul Newman Daytona for $2,000, you know, in estimates. And
crazy. So his watch sold for an insane sum. Yeah. I mean, another watch and without the provenance, what would that be worth?
Well, I was looking at this the other day, and I was trying to work out, you know, what the kind of market rate's been for them and where it started and where it's going and so on. So I mean, you could probably get a Paul Newman nowadays for like £150,000. You're kind of looking at that as like an entry point to the market.
Okay.
But at the same time, it's all about condition. And I know there's a bit of a kind of split of opinion, especially I suppose in the car game, restoring something's like kind of acceptable. I'm guessing if you find something period correct and replace it, it's like, okay, well that's it's from that period, it's made in the factory, it's okay. It's not. Is that right, or am I making a boo-boo?
Car restoration is a topic which can generate quite a lot of heated debate.
Mm-hmm.
What you can quite often find is that certainly in North America, they have a tendency, and I'm not making a judgment here, it just happens to be the case, that they have a tendency to try and restore cars so they are, to coin a phrase, better than new. But your question on watches is interesting, and I have a bit of a vested interest in this because although I'm not a big time watch collector, because you can see by the way I'm dressed, I don't have the money to spend on very exotic watches. I've got a watch which I'm thinking of selling, and you get a few sort of surface scratches on. It's a stainless steel watch. So the question for me is, do I get it polished, or do I just sell it the way it is? So where do we stand on that sort of thing?
Well, I mean, the kind of the garden rule is unpolished. That's the kind of thing. But I think it kind of depends really. Like in the vintage game, it's you bring it as you found it. It's you don't mess with it. But I think with modern watches, it's becoming more and more acceptable. I think
Can you tell if a watch has been polished?
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. So if I had a 1 year old Rolex and it had been polished, like you could look at it and go, I know that's been polished.
I mean, yes and no. I mean, it's harder to tell on the more modern pieces. Plus, the other thing is, with the advent of like laser technology getting better, it's harder to tell. So what used to be the case is, if you had like a Rolex Submariner case, they'd have loads of factory edges that were faceted and quite sharp and sharp-edged and so on. But as you polish them, you lose that. I mean, a good comparison is like, how a tyre balds, you lose that tread almost.
Yeah.
So it starts to lose its kind of factory shape. Whereas nowadays, you're able to re-add material with lasers and polish it down to... So it's getting a bit scary in some cases. So being on the lookout for that's quite difficult. But I mean, with modern stuff, I think it's... everybody wants a shiny new Rolex, so a lot of places, if you sell it to them, they'll just polish it up or send it for a service, and that's completely acceptable.
Okay.
Okay.
But a watch that's 30, 40 years old or possibly older, you want that to speak to its age.
Yeah.
You don't want to take a 1930 Cartier and just polish it to within an inch of its
I mean,
life.
the trick is finding something that's never been worn, always been in the box, in a plastic bag in the safe since the day it was born. That's the dream, but it doesn't really happen that much.
In my sort of, somewhat amateur monitoring of the watch market, I mean, I can't believe how much difference it makes. Watches get sold with what they call a full set, isn't it? and a full set is what? The box,
papers,
the warranty card.
Yeah, the warranty card. Yeah. So I mean, if you really want to get special, you can have like the bezel protector, like the stickers. Even though they've been removed, you can still have the stickers in there. Some Pateks have like a stylus for you to change the date through the apertures and stuff like that.
Right.
But yeah, I mean, like I've heard of sales being overturned when someone sold something as a full set and it's turned up without like a bezel protector or like a letter from the factory or something like that, and they've said
that's not a full set.
You said it was full set, and I want my money back.
Wow,
but it's
that's kind of crazy. But you go and buy a new Nautilus from your local Patek dealer. What you don't do, like an 8-year-old at Christmas, is rush home with it, rip it out of the packaging, and throw the packaging in the bin. No, that's not what.
Well, I mean, if you're looking to sell it now, and it's even got to the point where the retailers will completely remove all the seals, everything like that, so you're unable to sell it as new or as in factory condition. You used to be able to get like double sealed factory Patek Philippe, and this doesn't really happen anymore because they're aware of the resale market. So. Yeah, it's poison chalice really, getting the Nautilus.
No, it's fascinating stuff, and I think that what it's funny, chatting to you, because I think as well as this sort of relationship between car lovers being watch lovers and vice versa, there's a lot of similarities in the market.
Yeah.
And we'll finish up soon because
Sure.
we've been chatting for a while. But here's also something which is that drives car enthusiasts a little bit nuts. A lot of people will go out and buy a new supercar, hypercar, and they will never drive it because with each passing 500 kilometers, there's a depreciation curve associated with that. With watches, are people scared of wearing them, or is that less of an issue?
I think, with modern stuff, it's less of an issue. I think we talked a minute ago about refurbishing stuff and so on. If it goes through a proper, factory service, it's fine. I think sometimes people get a bit worried about having it nicked versus having it, lose value. I think maybe with vintage stuff, it's more of a thing. Like for instance, I'm a bit of a sucker for vintage Cartier as well, and I've got a really beautiful late 70s Cartier Tank Louis, which is, it's quite a small watch. But it's got quite a good, quite a good history of people wearing it. Muhammad Ali had one, Jackie Kennedy had one, slightly different one, admittedly, but then so did Andy Warhol. So it's a good spread. But I won't wear that when it rains. But then also if it's a really expensive, vintage and you clock it on a door or something like that, you're knocking 50 grand off it potentially if you hit it in the right spot.
Ouch.
So it's, if you hit the bezel or something like that. So yes and no, I think it's almost the reverse. Like, if you buy the right stuff, it tends to appreciate pretty drastically. Second you walk out the door.
I think the message needs to be luxury is for you. You've got to use it. You can't just look at it, can you?
No,
I think whether you're buying a car, if you've got a lovely car, just get out and drive
Hey,
it. If you've got a lovely watch,
it.
you got to wear it.
Right.
Granted, if it's not waterproof and it's lashing with rain,
don't
that might not be the best idea. But thank you, Tom. That's been really interesting. Thank you for joining us, and thank you everyone for joining us for the latest episode of RM Sotheby's Car Show. Recorded live here in Savile Row on a beautiful sunny day in June, and thank you again to Oswald Boating and his team for letting us use their wonderful store here on Savile Row to get this recording done. So we hope you've enjoyed it, and we'll see you next week indeed.